A judge in Brazil has authorized the release of former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva from jail. He's been serving a nearly 9-year sentence for corruption and money laundering. He's one of the subjects of a Netflix documentary that looks at Brazil's history and its leadership. Here's a preview.
Brazilian democracy and I are almost the same age. I thought that in our 30s, we would both be standing on solid ground.
Petra, for the first time, voting in the historical election.
I was 19 when Lula got elected. I remember the excitement.
Earlier, I spoke with filmmaker Petra Costa and producer Joanna Natasegara about the documentary and why it's relevant today. You know, Petra, you grew up in Brazil in a very political family. How did that shape the narrative of this documentary and your desire to do this?
Completely, because I grew up believing that democracy was my birthright. My mother used to wear a T-shirt written, "Give me democracy or give me death." And I thought I had achieved that birthright from a lifetime of both my parents fighting against the military dictatorship. And when democracy arrived, I was born kind of at the same time, and started as I came of age to take it for granted and believe it was a given. Until in 2016, I saw the ground shaking under my feet, similar to many other places in the world where we saw democracy at risk. And for me, it happened in a protest that I was filming, where I saw thousands of Brazilians dressed in the colors of the flag and singing national anthem, and asking some of them for the return of the military that had killed and tortured thousands of people in Brazil. So I decided that I had to make a film about that neurosis then and there, and that's how it began.
You know, I spent years in the Middle East, and for so long we thought democracy was going to be exported throughout the Middle East. What do you think has happened in the world where there feels to be this almost threatening scenario with democracies across the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think Petra's right. We've so long taken the idea of democracy for granted, haven't we? I think we all assumed we all knew what we meant by the idea of democracy, and yet now everybody's questioning that concept. Everybody's questioning what it means to protect democracies, and that's so, you know, what this film is about. What we take for granted, what we need to do to protect the rule of law and democracies. So I think that's what makes this film resonant for countries all over the world.
You call this the edge of democracy. Why?
Because it's a process of dismantling. It's a process of erosion of the rule of law and conflict between the institutions, and a lot of what some specialists call constitutional hardballing, which is kind of abusing of the Constitution to destroy your opponents, which we're seeing a rise of not just in Brazil, but in many places around the world, especially in the United States in the last few years. And it's one of the reasons that how democracy has eroded, I think, is that some parties have decided that it's faster to get into power and to stay longer in power if they just abuse of the Constitution and do whatever is needed to destroy their opponents.
You know, for the first time, the International Documentary Association Awards has a Best Director category, 5 films. And my understanding is all 5 films are either directed or co-directed by women. What do you make of that?
It's about time, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, if I can speak for, for Petra, she's an extraordinary director, and the film is not your usual political film. This is a real auteurs film. So those who like cinema as well, she's taken the personal and political and put that on the screen. And so many of those nominees are actually personal political stories. How interesting to see these political worlds through the female gaze.
You know, in the film you talk about the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff. We are launching an impeachment inquiry here in the U.S. Are there similar themes on impeachment?
Yes, for me it's particularly troubling to hear all the talks again, because for 1 year I was following impeachment in Brazil and in Congress, hearing all the trials and testimonies. And there it was quite complicated, I came to understand, because the legal accusations against Dilma were quite fragile. It was for budget maneuvering, which many presidents had allegedly done before her. While here, some commentators say that it's kind of at the root of why the impeachment law was even written, which is to prevent an abuse of power, and especially in terms of pressuring another nation to interfere with a national election. So if that is the case, it's why the impeachment law was written in the first place, to kind of prevent that type of abuse.
What do you hope, Petra, that people walk away with when they watch this film?
A few things. One is that I think as artists, we have a responsibility in face of fascism, of rise of hate, of intolerance, to try to heal what is happening and address what is happening. We can no longer shut our eyes to the kind of state of emergency that we live in right now. And as citizens as well, to be able to dialogue, to look at the person that you most disagree with into the eye and try to wake them up or wake each other up, that we are all depending on democracy to be able to survive on this planet.
The documentary is called Edge of Democracy. I want to thank you both for joining us.